we're heading. Now, by any stretch of the imagination, Boris Johnson, he's had an absolutely terrible week. It started with many thousands of people protesting against the prorogation of Parliament all across the country. And these were protests in all types of places, in cities, in towns, in villages, and they included all kinds of people, Brexiters as well as everyone else. He then lost all his votes in Parliament. He purged his party of the big beasts and turned it into a rump, which is now essentially just the Brexit Party limited company. Had an absolutely terrible Prime Minister's Question Time. He successfully made Jeremy Corbyn look like a statesman. His brother resigned, in effect saying that he was unable to support what Johnson was doing. And he gave a rambling, inarticulate speech in front of assembled police officers, which just looked weird, really. It was literally the worst week of any new Prime Minister in modern history. So it'd be easy, therefore, to assume that he's completely screwed, as it looks like he's backed into a corner and he's essentially just a lame duck Prime Minister. But that isn't true, and here's why I think that's not true. Now, I find it hard to believe where we are now wasn't wargamed by Cummings and Johnson. I don't think they would have factored in Johnson's appalling performance, but the destination, I think, would have probably been foreseen. I think they suspected a general election would be prevented by the opposition parties until after the 31st of October, and that they would force Johnson to go back to the EU and request an extension to Article 50. So assuming that is the case, I expect to see a showdown between the government and Parliament where Johnson will refuse to ask for an extension to Article 50, even though he'll be legally required to do so because of the new legislation that will be passed. Now, this will trigger cabinet resignations, but he won't care about that. It will also mean the government will fall, but again, he won't care about that. All Johnson and Cummings will now be looking at is the inevitable general election that's going to come up soon, probably in November. And as I've said before, they will frame it as the people versus Parliament. All that has happened in the past week will be used to create a narrative that Boris Johnson has bravely fought for to free the plucky British people from the yoke of Brussels, but the entire establishment, i.e. you and me, has thwarted them. They'll, of course, conveniently forget to mention that they literally are the establishment, that they are a cabal of millionaire and billionaire disaster capitalists, hell-bent on forcing us to leave every single free trade agreement, every single mutual recognition agreement, treaties, etc., that's enabled us to trade so freely over so many years, and had nothing to replace them with except to a few that they've managed to carry over, a tiny amount that they've managed to carry over. So Johnson will be portrayed as a hero to the people, the one man who is standing up for them, and they will spin the events to this end. I also expect the Brexit Party to enter into an electoral pact with what's left of the Conservative Party in an attempt to split that vote. In an event to attempt to not split that vote. So now it's looking pretty bad for the rest of us, right? Not necessarily. If the opposition parties can stay aligned, I don't believe the Tories and the Brexit Party can win a general election. So I do expect some kind of pact between the Lib Dems and the Greens, and probably the nationalist parties. I also hope that there'll be some kind of informal agreement between these parties and Labour, probably at a constituency level, as well as an agreement with the purged former Conservative MPs, because that would be the most sensible thing to do from our side. There's one other thing that's a real problem for the Conservatives and the Brexit Party limited company. And that is, they have quite a high combined vote, but that vote is concentrated in certain areas. It's not broadly spread across the country. Now, under first past the post, you need to have a broad reach in order to win an outright majority. And as it stands, I don't believe they have that. In fact, the purging of the Tory moderates could in the end prove to be a fatal mistake, because by doing that, they're also alienating a huge amount of potential One Nation Tory voters who are more likely to swing to the Liberal Democrats. In a general election campaign, anything can happen. I mean, we saw that in 2017, where Theresa May managed to lose a really big lead in the polls. It evaporated almost overnight. And I think the upcoming general election could see something like that happen. I believe that the Conservative and combined Brexit Party lead at the moment could be chipped away at and eventually evaporate. There's no certainty of that, but I think it could happen, especially the way Johnson looked against Corbyn at Prime Minister's questions. If Johnson is this bad at debate, at facing his opponents, then it should be fairly easy to chip away at his current lead in the polls, albeit quite a small lead compared to historic levels. So to recap, despite an absolutely appallingly embarrassing week for Boris Johnson, all is not lost, and he, along with Cummings, will do anything, including breaking the law, to get a general election that could be framed as the people versus Parliament, and a backlash against the so-called establishment, i.e. you and me, who they will claim have thwarted Brexit. They don't care that Parliament was elected in 2017 so as a newer mandate to act as it sees fit. They won't care about truth and honesty. They will do everything they can to whip up a frenzy against the rest of us and call us undemocratic and the establishment, even though they are the establishment. But I don't think a general election in the end is actually going to solve anything. I think a hung Parliament is still probably the most likely outcome. So I still expect, as I've been saying for such a long time now, eventually we will get a mandatory ratification referendum, as that really is the only way to break this impasse. And I still believe in the end the British people will vote to remain during that referendum. Thanks for watching.